A man arrested for the alleged unaliving of his wife died in police custody before he could ever face trial. David Vandermeer, 49, a former youth pastor from Las Vegas, Nevada, was taken into custody on Monday, June 23, 2026. He was booked into the Clark County Detention Center, awaiting extradition to Utah, where he had just been charged with first-degree murder and insurance fraud in connection with the death of his wife Bernadette, 20 years ago. He turned 49 on Wednesday. That same evening, Las Vegas police discovered he had seriously injured himself inside his cell. He was transported to a local hospital. He was declared dead early Thursday morning. He died before he could answer for what investigators say he did to Bernadette Vandermeer on a hiking trail in Zion National Park on August 22, 2006. And what they say he did is push her off a cliff. To understand this story, you have to go back to the beginning. Not to the cliff, not to the arrest, but to a church. In 2001, David and Bernadette Vandermeer were part of a Las Vegas church plant called New Song Christian Church. David worked with the youth ministry. Bernadette led worship, described by her family as a joyous spirit who loved music, loved hiking, and loved the Lord. By all visible appearances, they were a ministry couple serving their church together. But according to investigators, the year after they joined that church, 2002, David Vandermeer began grooming a 14-year-old girl in his youth group. Court documents identify her only as SH. SH told investigators that David showed her what she described at the time as special attention. He bought her gifts. He touched her knee. He gave her hugs. This continued for years, as she moved through high school, sitting in his youth group, under his spiritual care. When SH turned 16, the legal age of consent in Nevada, David Vandermeer took her to a family-owned cabin in Bryan Head, Utah, a ski resort town, approximately 200 miles from Las Vegas. At that cabin, she told investigators, her youth pastor took her virginity. Under Utah state law, that is Grape.sh, who was a teenager at the time, told investigators she thought of it as a relationship that became sensual. That framing, that language, is itself a product of the grooming. She was a young one in a youth group. He was her pastor. After the Bryan Head trip, according to the arrest warrant affidavit, the SA continued regularly. David bought SH a secret phone and told her to hide it from her mother so he could contact her and direct her on where to meet him. They went to pay-by-the-hour hotels, and on at least some occasions, inside the church building, after hours. Investigator Jessica Bate, of the Washington County District Attorney's Office, who was assigned this case in October 2025, found phone records from the early 2000s that corroborated SH's account. Now here is where the story turns fatal. According to SH's testimony, David Vandermeer made one statement to her that she never forgot. Investigator Bate recorded it in her affidavit this way. SH recalls David telling her the only way they could be together is if Bernadette was not alive. Shortly after that conversation, David Vandermeer purchased life insurance policies on himself and his wife, initially $150,000 each. He then increased both payouts to $600,000 each. His annual income at the time was $38,000. Meanwhile, Bernadette Vandermeer was not doing well inside that marriage. She wrote letters to her mother describing how lonely she felt. She told her mother that David would take trips with the youth group, but never took her anywhere alone. That he gave other people attention and affection, but not her. She suspected he was being unfaithful. She got a second job at the New York Hotel and Casino on the Las Vegas Strip to help with finances, because the couple was struggling financially. She did not know what her husband was doing. She did not know what he had said. The hiking trip to Zion National Park, planned for late August 2006, was reportedly the first time in years that the two of them had gone anywhere alone together. She was excited to go. Her father, Richard Gudenkoff, told investigators that Bernadette loved hiking. His exact words, "She was a mountain goat." On August 20, 2006, 2 days before that trip, SH told David Vandermeer she was done. She wanted to end whatever was between them. She said it felt wrong. She wanted to move on. David Vandermeer and his wife left for Utah the following day. On the morning of August 22, 2006, a rescue team found Bernadette Vandermeer at the bottom of a 1,200-foot cliff at Angel's Landing, one of the most iconic and most dangerous trails in Zion National Park. The 4.8-mile climb includes a half-mile stretch considered among the most dangerous hikes in America. More than a dozen people have fallen to their deaths there. David told emergency responders he had been photographing the sunrise when Bernadette slipped. He said he didn't see it happen. He only heard her scream. After a 3-month investigation, the death was ruled accidental. The case was closed. But there were problems with David's account from day one. First, Bernadette did not fall in one of the locations where people typically lost their footing. Park rangers noted she was not in the more dangerous sections of the trail. Second, David told rescuers he had turned his back to photograph the sunrise, but his 911 call was placed more than 30 minutes before sunrise. An officer involved in the original 2006 investigation later told the Washington County DA's office that David's statement had seemed, in his own words, contrived. People inside the church had doubts too. The members, the parents, the young people who sat in David Vandermeer's youth group. They never fully believed the story, but the case was closed, and there was nothing they could do. David Vandermeer filed a life insurance claim following Bernadette's death and received approximately $567,000. He bought a new home nearly 3 times the size and 3 times the cost of the home he had shared with his late wife. He took the entire youth group on an all-expenses-paid trip, and he bought SH a car. In 2008, David Vandermeer was fired from New Song Christian Church, not for unaliving his wife, and not for what he had done to SH, but for allegedly providing alcohol to minors at his home. After leaving the church, he and SH married secretly. They divorced in 2014. Starting around 2015, adults who had grown up in David's youth group began returning to the church with stories. They went to the senior pastor at the time, Barry Diamond, and started connecting dots. Multiple former youth group members recalled instances where David had reported things stolen: a drum kit, a car, collected insurance payouts, and then suspiciously recovered the stolen items. The pattern was consistent. It looked like insurance fraud. They also began piecing together accounts of sensual misconduct. Those former members reported what they knew to local law enforcement in 2022. An investigation was opened, but stalled. It was relaunched in 2025 when new information emerged confirming that David's involvement with SH was ongoing at the time Bernadette died. Jessica Bate was assigned the case in October 2025. She investigated for 8 months. She filed for an arrest warrant 19 years, 9 months, and 25 days after Bernadette Vandermeer fell to the bottom of that cliff. Investigator Bates' conclusion was unambiguous. She wrote in her affidavit, "David caused Bernadette to fall. David Vandermeer, acting with clear intent, committed the crime of unaliving, intentionally pushing his wife, Bernadette Vandermeer, off the top of Angel's Landing." She further concluded he was acting with intent to commit a crime for the purposes of financial gain and in efforts to preserve his image. David Vandermeer was charged on Tuesday with first-degree unaliving and insurance fraud. U.S. Marshals arrested him the following day, Monday, June 23rd, outside a yoga studio in Las Vegas, where he had been teaching classes. When news of the arrest reached Bernadette's father, Richard Gudenkauf, he had 2 words for the Las Vegas Review-Journal: "Thank you, Jesus." Her mother, Laura Gudenkauf, told reporters, "I wanted to think it was an accident. I miss everything about her. She never stopped missing her daughter. She just had to wait 2 decades to learn the truth about how she died." And then David Vandermeer died in that detention cell before a single day of trial. There will be no verdict, no courtroom testimony, no moment where the evidence is laid before a jury and a finding is made. The charges die with him, and Bernadette's family is left holding what investigators concluded, but what a court will now never confirm. That is its own particular grief. For those of us watching from inside the church, this story demands a reckoning. David Vandermeer operated inside Christian ministry for years. He had consistent, trusted access to teenagers. He used the cover of Pastoral Care to groom a 14-year-old over multiple years. He allegedly used the proceeds of crime to reward a youth group, turning grieving young ones into unwitting participants in what the investigation describes as a calculated financial scheme. The people closest to the situation had doubts in 2006. Those doubts were well-founded. But it took until 2015 for those former youth group members to find their voice. It took until 2022 for a report to be filed. It took until 2025 for the investigation to be taken seriously enough to reach an arrest warrant. 19 years. The church must ask itself, not about David Vandermeer specifically, because he is gone, but about the conditions that allow a man like this to operate for years behind the title of youth pastor. The grooming of SH did not begin the day he took her to Brian Head. It began in a youth group room, with gifts and special attention, and quiet, careful access to a 14-year-old who had no idea what was being done to her. That is a safeguarding failure. And safeguarding failures require only a trusted adult and an unguarded door. Bernadette Vandermeer was 28 years old when she died at the bottom of that cliff. She was a worship leader. She loved hiking. She was excited, by all accounts, to finally go somewhere alone with her husband, for the first time in years. She deserved better from her husband. She deserved better from the systems that closed her case in 2006, without getting it right. And she deserved the chance to see the truth told in open court. That chance is gone now. But her name is on the record, and the record will say what investigators concluded. She was pushed.